around the country and around the world. Environmental groups are strongly denouncing President Obama's controversial new plan to open up large swaths of the Atlantic, Gulf, and Alaskan coasts to offshore oil and gas drilling. On Wednesday, Obama and Interior Secretary Ken Salazar announced an end to a long-standing moratorium on oil drilling along the East Coast from Delaware to the central coast of Florida. New areas of the southeast Gulf Coast will also be open to drilling, as will the Arctic Ocean north of Alaska. The only area that will be protected is Bristol Bay in southwestern Alaska. In announcing the proposal from Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland on Wednesday, Obama said, quote, "This is not a decision that I've made lightly."
There will be those who strongly disagree with this decision, including those who say we should not open any new areas to drilling. But what I want to emphasize is that this announcement is part of a broader strategy that will move us from an economy that runs on fossil fuels and foreign oil to one that relies more on homegrown fuels and clean energy. And the only way this transition will succeed is if it strengthens our economy in the short term and the long run. To fail to recognize this reality would be a mistake. Now, on the other side, there are going to be some who argue that we don't go nearly far enough, who suggest we should open all our waters to energy exploration without any restriction or regard for the broader environmental and economic impact. And to those folks, I've got to say this. We have less than 2% of the world's oil reserves. We consume more than 20% of the world's oil. And what that means is that drilling alone can't come close to meeting our long-term energy needs. And for the sake of our planet and our energy independence, we need to begin the transition to cleaner fuels now. So the answer is not drilling everywhere all the time, but the answer is not also for us to ignore the fact that we are going to need vital energy sources to maintain our economic growth and our security. Ultimately, we need to move beyond the tired debates of the left and the right, between business leaders and environmentalists, between those who would claim drilling is a cure-all and those who would claim it has no place. Because this issue is just too important to allow our progress to languish while we fight the same old battles over and over again.
While the oil industry, business groups, and some Republicans offered muted support for the Obama administration's proposal, environmental groups and a number of Democrats are raising concerns. For more, we're joined on the phone now from California by Brendan Cummings, the Public Lands Director at the Center for Biological Diversity. The center was one of the plaintiffs in the case that brought the Bush administration's original 2007 to 2012 offshore oil drilling plan to a standstill a year ago and triggered the review of this plan, which was announced yesterday. Brendan Cummings, welcome to Democracy Now! Your response to President Obama's announcement.
It's horribly disappointing. Rather than instituting a fundamental change of the failed energy policies of the Bush-Cheney era, what we saw yesterday is Obama essentially embracing wholeheartedly the policy of that we can really drill our way to energy independence, that we can drill our way out of the climate crisis, and that somehow it's okay to permanently sacrifice some of the most sensitive, some of the most ecologically important areas of our nation just for short-term political gain. And that's horrendously disappointing, and we would have hoped for far better from the president.
And Brendan Cummings, what about how important would this drilling be, even in terms of oil supply? Because clearly 30 years ago, the Reagan administration argued for offshore drilling as a way to help establish energy independence for the United States, but we have only continued to use more oil and been more dependent on fossil fuels.
Right, exactly. If we're ever to achieve energy independence, we really need to move away from oil. We need to move towards truly renewable sources, and we also need to greatly reduce our consumption of energy. Unfortunately, this does neither. Offshore oil drilling, announcing and opening up new areas for leasing, is a very slow process. The initial environmental harm comes quickly with the exploratory drilling, the seismic surveys, things of that sort, but the actual oil doesn't come to market for years, if not decades. So it has very little real impact on either the national or the global economy of oil. But where it does have impact is in the areas that are actually drilled, and of course politically, because here Obama is, in essence, just agreeing with the critiques, the drill baby drill critique of 2 years ago that as a candidate he was critical of, and instead now he seems to be adopting that idea that, yes, politically we have to make the concession of drilling if we want to advance positive energy policies, and that's absurd.
What about his argument that he wants to move beyond the tired old debates between left and right on this issue and try to establish a new common ground for how to deal with oil exploration off coast?
Unfortunately, that frame from Obama is all too typical in his environmental policies, but there is no left and right in an oil spill. We have no existing technologies to clean up an oil spill in the icy conditions in the Arctic. Drilling in the Chukchi and Beaufort Seas off Alaska is likely to be a disaster for the polar bear, for the native communities that live on the coast of Alaska, for the endangered whales of the area, for the coastlines of Florida if we drill in those areas. And that's not a left or right debate. That's not a debate over protecting everything or an energy policy that allows greater access to American energy. You can't debate an oil spill. You can only prevent it. And in certain areas of our country, certain areas of our coast, they're so sensitive, the only way to truly prevent it is to never open these areas up for drilling in the first place.
We're talking to Brendan Cummings with the Public Lands Program. He's Public Lands Director of the Center for Biological Diversity. Who benefits from this new policy, Brendan?
In the short term, oil companies. For example, in Alaska, one of the most contested